and welcome to Christ-Centered Reflections. I'm Reverend Stephen Lawrence, and with me today are Reverend Wayman Rucker, Reverend Gardner, Reverend Donna Jones, and Reverend Kenneth Cox. When we were last together, the ministerial staff of the White Rock Baptist Church were discussing Romans chapter 1, verse 1. In that passage, Paul describes himself using 4 different words or categories of words. 2 of those categories God is responsible for. Paul says that he's an apostle sent by God, and then he also says that God has horizoned his life. He's created some boundaries that have enough distance for vision and for growth. Today we're going to take a look at those last 2 categories, where Paul refers to his own name and where he looks at a description of himself as the servant, literally the slave of God. And we hope that these reflections will continue to help you in your Christian walk. Well, let's look at the second part of this description that Paul gives. He talks about he starts off his sentence really by saying, "I'm Paul, and I am a servant of Jesus Christ," and then he goes on to the called and separated. Called and separated is what God does in terms of the calling. I really see these first 2 things that he says as his response to what God has done. He says, and again, I'm going to take him backwards. The second thing he says is, "I am a servant of Jesus Christ."
Right.
And now you've already touched on this, Ken.
Yes.
The idea that not just am I sent, but that I'm sent and under orders.
Yes, sir.
It's not my agenda.
Yes, sir.
It's not
Yes,
my
sir.
will.
That's right.
And the thing that's really
Yes, sir.
poignant about this word that we
Yeah.
don't pick up so much as the church in Rome would have picked up is that for a Roman citizen,
Yes.
the word slave or servant is a horrible word.
Right.
A Roman citizen would never describe him or herself that way,
Right.
would never want to be in that situation. We are part of the winning team. We conquer the world. We don't
Right.
get conquered.
Right.
We're not slaves and servants. And people who are slaves and servants are people we have put in that position. So for Paul to start off his letter to the church in Rome, of people who don't know him, that he's trying to make a good impression with, and to say to them, "I am the slave,"
Yeah.
servant is a kind word.
Yeah, yes, yes.
I'm the slave of Jesus Christ.
Right, right.
He is saying to them, "I'm willing to take this word, which is abhorrent to you, and redeem it
Yes.
by the way that I acted out. I want you to know that when I come into your midst, I'm not about me. There's nothing that I do that's about me. It's all about Jesus Christ." And wow, if there's not a piece that ministry in this century needs to hear, it's that it's not about me.
Right.
Because in some ways, our work has been so swept into the mainstream
Right.
of self-promotion
Right, right,
that it's
right.
always about me.
That's right.
It's me incorporated.
That's
it's
right.
me ministry.
That's
it's
right.
me whatever. And in the meantime, I might do a little something to help somebody. But my name is all over it, so that when you come back, you know my face is there. It's so difficult to get out of the promoted piece back to the servant piece,
That's
the
right.
slave piece, which
That's
says, here's what has to get done. I don't care who gets the credit. I don't care who comes out on top, but this work is going to get done.
Right.
And servants and slaves often have to give life
Yeah.
in order for that to happen. And Paul's ready to do that as well. So I think that's a powerful response to what God has called. He's made me an apostle, but I've given myself the rank of servant.
Yes.
Not chief apostle, not
Yes.
head apostle, not
Right.
head apostle in charge. I'm the slave apostle. And then the second part of it is that he claims his name. My name is Paul. Now, this whole thing about Saul Paul.
Yeah, right.
His Hebrew name is Saul.
Yeah.
But he's got a Hebrew mother and a Greek father.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he lives in Tarsus, which is the Greek world. And
Right.
he's a tent maker as
Right.
well as a Pharisee.
Right,
So
right.
he's got a life with this other culture
Right.
as well as a life within the Hebrew culture.
Right, right.
And when he's out there selling tents and dealing with Gentiles, he's Paul. And when he's in the synagogue reading through the Mishnah, he's Saul. When he claims this name, he's saying, "I am all in
All in.
for this ministry
Right.
ministry to the Gentiles.
Right.
The place that God has horizoned me, I'm all in." And he doesn't really know what it's going to cost him.
That's right.
Because at some point he's going to say to a brother Jew, you know, these new guys really don't need to keep the kosher law. And they really don't need circumcision. And they're going to, what are you talking about?
Right.
And they're going to jump him when he's outside the temple in
That's
Jerusalem.
right, that's right.
Because they think that he's undermining Judaism. He's going to be so much for the Gentiles that he will look like he is giving up his own faith,
Right.
even though he never does it.
Right.
And he will go against Peter and go against anybody else that says they can't come in.
That's right.
That's full commitment from
That's
a person who, in his previous life, was so clear about his Jewish heritage
Yeah.
that he knew who was going to burn at the end of time, and it was those guys. And now he's saying, no, those guys get to come in. No restraints, no restrictions, just faith. it's an amazing transformation, and it's an amazing claiming of his heritage. And by the way, the name Paul literally means little. What? What is there little about Paul? But he keeps that humility.
Yes.
That
Yes.
This is who I am. Not Paul. But Paul.
Well, he was a little guy too.
Yeah. That's the tradition about him is that he was a small guy.
Right. But powerful. Paul, powerful.
Paul,
big bite. What helps me is I come from a military background, and one thing you learn about being part of a military family is that when they say jump, you jump. But I think in terms of the separation, there's a Greek word called hupotasso, which means under order. And see, when you're separated and you go into the military, doesn't matter how much you love your mother or your father. Once you get to boot camp, they let you know you're in the U.S. Army or the Air Force or whatever. And I think for me, that has helped me adapt to the many areas that God has sent me. Whether here at White Rock or wherever I've gone, I've seen that as an extension of his calling, that regardless of what others wanted me to do, I'm under orders from the chief commander, Jesus Christ, and he can call me wherever, and I willingly, even as a servant, a slave, I'm his slave.
Right.
So there is freedom even in that, freedom to do his will. And to me, this is what really helps me in this separation, is that I'm separated to the gospel of Christ to do it his way and to be under his orders, regardless of what I may want to do, because, I'm human. And sometimes I don't see it God's way. But he has helped me through the horizons to see, you don't see it right away. Now you understand why I sent you there, because I knew what was in you before you did and before anybody else. So I think that as we keep that in mind, it helps us to relish the part that we play in being a part of this gospel and to proclaim the name of Jesus Christ everywhere.
But in this society, it seems that no one wants to be a servant.
No.
We'd rather be served than
Come on.
work as a servant.
Yeah.
And so that shows you a lot about Paul. And also, when you're a servant, that means that you do that which is your master's will.
Yes, sir.
And it's not your will.
No.
It's the master's will. It's with Jesus, not my will, but thy will be done. And so therefore, when we're serving God, when we're called to be a slave of God, the Lord, that means that we may be called to do some things that we really don't want to do.
Right.
We may not want to do at a particular time. And but yet it's the will of our Master, Jesus Christ, and we have to do it. And then finally, some people don't like to be labeled servant, including members in the church. I'm not a servant. You say, I'm a servant of God. I'm not a servant.
That's true.
Because there's that negative connotation.
That negative connotation. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
I was thinking about the name piece again, and this idea of this self-identification. And it reminded me of a conversation I had with a friend of mine from Ireland, who's Catholic. And this was many years ago when there was a lot of unrest.
Right.
And we were talking about the black-white issue in the States. And in Ireland, the Catholics are called the Blacks of Ireland. But the thing that he brought up, he said, Jay, but the difference is they don't know I'm Catholic until I tell them.
Right.
You walk in.
Right.
They know. And so I say that to say, but it just really it raises the bar a bit when we think about Paul and how he does the self-identification when he could just blend in. He does the self-identification to stand out, and not so much stand out like this, but to stand out like, you're different, and put yourself in harm's way.
Oh yeah,
Because of
definitely.
that.
Definitely.
You mentioned something that stirred something in me about self-identification, and again in our culture, we want people to know who we are,
Right.
but it's almost like we don't really care what they know about us. It's more important to be known than to be known for anything good.
Sure.
If I was on television for 15 minutes because I was on one of those attack talk shows or whatever, I want people to tune in and see me as I'm being humiliated because it's great to be on TV. Being humiliated.
Right.
Our name used to mean something.
Used to mean
if you had a name.
That's right.
That it was important. Not that it was important.
Right.
It stood for something.
Right.
And Now, not so much.
Right.
Paul says, this is my name, this is my heritage, this is who I am, and this is not, and you're right, I could boast about it,
Yes.
because I got stuff to boast about.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
I consider everything I've accomplished as worth nothing.
Right.
To know Christ.
That's
and
right.
And to suffer with him.
That's
and
right.
to
That's
be
right.
his servant.
That's right.
So and that's where he sees his identity.
That's right.
And not in the name and all the heritage. We've been talking about calling, and because we are all ministers, people hear that language and they think about ministry in terms of calling. I know that, again, my experience in Sunday school was that as soon as people find out you can talk, the next thing out of their mouth is, you're going to be a preacher. Because that's the only path we see from talking to calling. But the call is a multifaceted thing.
Right.
It is all of the gifts that God gives for all the people. It can go in so many different directions. And even when we look at call narratives in the scripture. Here's Abraham called. He's not called to be a minister. Moses, no. Hannah, no. We've got all these examples of lay people doing the work. Yet somehow we have this image of call tied just to ministers. It's not what's in the text. And if we will look at the things that we do, and do we have to de-sanctify them in order to talk about the common things that people that know how to do that are part of a calling?
I think one of the a really wonderful grounding and humbling experience, and in my life I got to see it in the lives of some of the lay folk when we went on a retreat to the Missionary Sisters of the Precious Blood convent, and these were I think they're Carmelite sisters, and the kids were asking the nuns about this whole thing around calling, and everybody had chores to do. And so we were there at a time when they invited the young people to come into the kitchen and help do the dishes. And there was a lady there who's lay, and she's called to come to the convent and do the dishes. So she was there happily doing dishes, and the kids were like, "You were called to do dishes?" Like, "Oh yeah, definitely called to do dishes." And she talked about just how while she does dishes, she prays, how people bring the prayer lists, and she thinks about the people who came for the retreats, and she just expressed so much about calling. It almost made somebody say, I feel called to do dishes. But she was working the work of God who sent her.
Yes.
In that work, and for her, it was a calling. She was faithful. She did it all the time. She used it as an opportunity to pray. She was helping. It was a calling like nobody's business. And the way she expressed it, if we all could see everything that we do as calling, the world would be such a better place. And how do we help people to hear that? It's like, definitely called.
Yeah. You captured what I was trying to say when I say we have to de-sanctify them. This belongs only in this place. This is only can be done here. If there are things in my life that I do every day, but I don't think about them in terms of offering them up to God, it's not that same sense of this is a moment. When someone calls on the phone, you got to talk to them. Oh, I'm too busy. Not if this is a moment. You take the moment, because you don't know what grows out of this thing. And you're right. If that becomes something we think about and look at all the time, then it's not just our Sunday ministry, not just our elected office, not just our appointed responsibility. It's the thing that whelms up in us, where God is saying, go over and sit over there and spend a moment. Take time to do this. Spend a little more attention to this. That's responding.
Yeah.
I wonder, what does the language or how does the language influence that when we talk about calling and those who are lay, the laity? And I think sometimes we might use that as an excuse. I mean, laity, just generally speaking, is just a non-specialized person in a particular area. And so, how often do we use this term? Do we do this separation between clergy and laity, and say, and so people say, well, clergy people are called, and lay people are not called, and so then we get some struggling, and we forget about the entire concept of the body, and different aspects do different things. All that Paul talks about. But perhaps if people were clearer on this idea of those who are lay and those who are professionals, and we recognize that that has nothing to do with our work or our calling.
Or
to the body of
calling,
Christ.
yeah.
It has something to do with what we're doing in the body of Christ.
That's good.
I think that could be helpful in our doing what we're called to do.
Thank you once again for watching this edition of Christ-Centered Reflections. As always, we invite for questions and comments. You can check us out on our Facebook page and on the White Rock YouTube channel. Blessings and joy.